Episode 7 coming to you from a motel room just outside of Hamilton Airport. My second day of MIQ. It's good to be back in New Zealand, I guess, this week, but I thought I'd share a few thoughts. It was an interesting process coming back into the country. There's been countless horror stories of thousands of people overseas trying to get into MIQ using the allocation system online, and it was quite staggering to see at one point over 26,000 people try to scramble for the 3,000 spots available. You know, I get it. I get that the government has their first and foremost priority as being the safety of the population to protect New Zealanders. However, part of this protection, I believe, should also extend to the people that have just had to commute overseas to regularly make an income and make a livelihood. Some consideration needs to be placed on alternatives to enforcing a 14-day quarantine to those of us who are fully vaccinated and have been for months now. What this current cabinet and government fail to consider, in my belief, is the unintended consequences of this like simplified blanket approach to this the complex issue that sweeps across social, economic, and health sectors. The flow and effect of bad decision making often has the potential to create future, more complex problems that were originally there. I read somewhere that the current lockdown in New Zealand is alone costing over $1 billion per week. So right there, your future generations, future taxpayers, we paying back the interest for years and years to come. What people fail to realise is that this will be at the expense of other budget expenditure, like increasing funding for nurses or police or mental health and education. Nothing is free in this world, and everything has a flow-on effect. As a specific example of the necessity of constant travel and requiring constant international travel during these times, you can just look back in my last 12 months in America. I point towards the most recent Ryder Cup. It's a great example that the world is moving on. The company who I currently contract to, Animation Research, and their sports division called Dueys, has covered the past 11 Ryder Cups, and in the past they've had to send up to 12 people on site, whether that tournament is in Europe or America. And now they just send one, just me. I've worked at I have most PGA Tour events since March this year. And before then, I was over there from June to October in 2020 doing the same thing. My main task on site is to rig and set up the remote operating system that was innovated by John Rendell and the team back in Dunedin. And I would also locally operate most of the time, whilst the team back in New Zealand doing night shift hours and conducting. It basically allows them to conduct the exact same business as they would as if they were previously on site with me. For all the bad that COVID has introduced to this world, it has also exposed the companies that are willing to be on the cutting edge of innovation and change. The ones who adapt during the hard times are also the ones that flourish during the good times, or the economic boom, so to speak. In doing my task in America and being on the front line, albeit not the normal use of the word front line, such as nursing or border workers or police, I've been able to support a motivated team of people back in New Zealand, to ensure this particular contract that on the PGA Tour that the company has was delivered and successfully done so, and that therefore jobs were kept and livelihoods were kept and we could survive through this. Because of the MIQ lottery system, the company wasn't able to send anyone over to the US to give me any substantial breaks. This was basically on my part as well. I sort of reviewed the schedule, basically because the economics or time required to do so simply didn't add up to the output that it was going to be required. Now, I'm a firm believer that you make your own luck in this world, and that the harder you work, the luckier you become. And it's up to you to act on the opportunities that are put in front of you when they do arise, how difficult they may be to spot. In this case, there was some good fortune in my circumstance. I travelled to Auckland in February 2020, where I went to the US Embassy and applied for a media visa. And the next week I successfully got that, and it was a 5-year media visa that basically gives me access to America until 2026 or something like that. 3 weeks later is when shit really started to hit the fan, and Trump basically made that a lot harder to obtain. Subsequently, it provided me with the opportunity to actually do what I've done for the past year and a half without the consistent threat of having to fight for an MRQ spot every 3 months or so. When that opportunity presented itself and I was asked to travel to America in June 2020, during the middle of a pandemic, during the middle of the Black Lives Matter protests, there's a lot of social unrest going on. I was asked to help implement the new remote operating system, and I didn't think twice. It was only 12 months prior to this in 2019 where I was struggling to get consistent work. I think I worked like 6 or 7 weeks for the company, and I was forced to move back into my parents' place in Invercargill, and it forced some hard thinking about whether I needed to change my approach to what I was doing and play it safe and get a 9 to 5 job in Invercargill or in Southland. And I started working on the pot lines at TY, working night shifts and day shifts, 2 days nights, 2 days days, with full protective equipment, respirator, hard hat, everything going on. And you basically had to sweep in and around 1,000-degree furnaces, making like $25 an hour. I remember sitting on one of the potline nibbles early one morning during a night shift, probably like 4 a.m, thinking, what can I possibly do to change my current scenario and to fight for what I want to do as a living? I grabbed a notebook and I remember writing down a specific list of things that I wanted to achieve, and I believed that were achievable for the next 12 months. I think this was like August 2019, and that the goal period was going to be for August 2019 to August 2020. To break down this goal setting, the main topics were placed into 3 categories. I had personal, financial, and professional. And under each category, I wrote about half a dozen incredibly specific goals, and some were fanciful, some were achievable. I remember printing these onto a document with like size 4 font, small enough that I can just print them out onto a piece of paper and put them inside of my phone case, which would serve as a constant reminder of, I had to do what I had to do on this list to get me out of the current situation and to improve my life. The next step, of what I used to do during that time that I was struggling, I made a weekly to-do list. There's no secret process to do this. The trick was to make it incredibly specific. And at the start, you can make a list that easily covers an entire A4 page, because if you're mentally in a spot to start doing things like that, if you're mentally in a spot where things aren't the way that they're supposed to be, and that you want to change your own circumstances, naturally there's a lot to be done. So the trick was to be brutally honest about things that needed to be done that week. And if you had something that was too big or too scary to even start doing, to incrementally break that down into smaller segments and start there. When things aren't going your way too much, there's something incredibly powerful about physically crossing out these things on your to-do list, and slowly see that list develop and shrink over the weeks to come. And you also realize how freer your mind becomes to focus on things that are happening right in front of you, instead of losing yourself in thought about your own current situation and why the world's out to get you and all these sort of things. It means that you're not dwelling on things because you've already, in a sense, spewed out your own thoughts onto the bit of paper, and they're no longer in your head. The secret to seeing impactful and meaningful change in any area of your life is, like, I'm only speaking in my own experience, is the art of incremental progress and being brutally honest with yourself placing that ego aside and admitting that when things aren't going your way, that the world isn't out to get you, and that the way forward is personal responsibility and taking ownership, how difficult that may be. It reinforces my own belief that you create your own luck. The hardest thing to do is to start something, and once you actually get traction and you can slowly see that you are moving, that's where the motivation comes from, and you actually have a foundation to leap from. Now, did I expect at age 24 that I was going to be moving back into my parents' job and searching for a temporary contract, making and working around molten aluminium? No. And did I go through some hard times during those 6 months in 2019? Absolutely. Photography deals that were once there that were falling through, uh, animation research were all filled up in terms of manning, and my politics degree wasn't going anywhere fast. The overarching goal was to make sports technology my full-time gig, and to incorporate it, travel and inside of it. Straight out of uni, I took that chance by going into the field of broadcasting and sports technology by accepting a short-term contract to be the ball tracker in the Deuchrass process on the Black Apps tour. It really opened my eyes to this industry, to this hidden industry that I didn't even know existed until this point. From there, I realized that no matter how hard it gets, it'd be worth it, because to do something you love doing that's constantly challenging and ever changing whilst traveling around the country and being involved in sports, which is one of my passions, is much better than doing night shifts on, one of the pot lines making aluminium. That fueled some self motivation, and I knew that a bad day on the job for Virtual Eye on the cricket or the golf is still 1,000 times better than doing hard labor work on top of a 1,000-degree furnace. And believe it or not, that wasn't the messiest job that I've had. I'll probably get into those down the future. So when the phone call came from during the end of sort of 2019, I was already in the process of changing my mentality around failure and success, personal responsibility and things. And I remember getting a phone call by Reese at the time. He's the golf manager at ARL, and he was asking if I basically wanted to be interested in a more of a full-time American-based or PGA Tour-based gig in 2020. And did I hesitate for 1 minute to take that? No, not at all. One of the first steps I actually made was I transferred the habit of the goal making from my personal life into the professional life, and shared the ways that I wanted to improve and progress with the company and the ways that I could benefit that company in the next 12 months. And this helped a lot. Fast forward to the present day, and I don't even make a weekly to-do list now. That habit is well ingrained in me mentally. The productivity that was so hard to come by in 2019 for a number of reasons now comes a lot more naturally. The stresses that were there in 2019, the financial stress, the living situation, the career stress, and the toll it took on my mental health naturally no longer exists. I'm in this incredibly fortunate position now where I'm never the smartest person in the room, so to speak. I'm surrounded by innovative and intelligent people who constantly push the boundaries in technology. I've never been the smartest person in any room I've been in, but I know for a fact that I'll give anyone a good run for their money on attitude and self-belief and work ethic. Another thing that's helped me is to take this brutally honest look at yourself and your own character flaws, setting aside the ego to realize that they actively need to be worked on and looked at, or else the same trends and problems will continue to occur in your professional life. You can do this by seeking constructive feedback from the workplace or even mates, and not pushing back once they actually tell you. A lot of people are too afraid or uncomfortable to do this. I could list you like 10 negative character traits that I've got right now, and I'm well aware of them. But I'll leave that one aside and just mention that it's never too late to try and improve on your own character. And it does really take you places. Being grounded for me has been incredibly important over the past 12 months. Being in a very privileged position at the moment. I've traveled all across America, stayed in beautiful hotels, gone to the best golf courses in the world, had the privilege to play at most of them. Being able to spend time in Manhattan and New York, Florida, even over in Australia, traveling with the Australian cricket team, staying in 5-star hotels, doing something that I love doing, experiencing things in places that I never thought I would ever be exposed to at the age of now 26. There's always that little thought at the back of my mind where not to get too carried away with it. As I found out in 2019, things can quickly change, and you can find yourself, uh, you know, like I got a little too confident for my own good, and only to be brought back down to my knees, sweeping the floor at 4 a.m. in the aluminium smelter. That all it takes is for a contract not to renew or something out of like your own power to happen, and you're back to square one. To bring it back to my original thought on MIQ and the blanket approach that the government is taking there are industries and there's workers out there who are fully vaccinated like myself, who rely on crossing the border to make a living, and that the past 12 months have added an additional stress that has been quite unprecedented. The question on whether a New Zealand citizen and taxpayer has the right of passage into their own country when they're fully vaccinated. In no way am I comparing the openness or the social climate in America to the one that's now in New Zealand. I strongly hold a view that New Zealand's response to COVID-19 in 2020 was admirable. And however, the past few months or so has exposed a number of flaws, with the least being the slow uptake in vaccinations across the country. I, for one, being a non-American resident and not even a taxpayer over there, was fully vaccinated by April this year. It was as easy as making an appointment and going into a Walmart and getting the jab, and you're done. America's initial response to COVID-19 was horrific, but their response to the vaccine rollout couldn't be more different to this. It was honestly impressive with how fast I think over 150 million people have been vaccinated already, and then they can now move about their lives more freely compared to New Zealand. Anyway, that's some thoughts and a rant about the MIQ process and the current situation at the border, and also staying grounded in my situation. Thanks for listening.